Good day, everyone. This lecture, we will start looking at the final account and also including a final payment certificate based on the agreed final account. As we all know by now is that your final account, you'll commence on day one with your final account, building up a draft final account. You issue monthly payment certificates, interim payment certificates based on your draft final account. But at a point, you need to wrap up the final account signed by the employer and the contractor, and then based on that account, we will then issue a final payment certificate. So let's look at the actual task where we've got identified contract instructions. Contract instruction number 1, which stipulates the remeasurement of foundations. So we're going to omit what we've measured and we add, and we've got up till, in this example, 6 contract instructions in contract instruction number 6, which now asks for the paint of the concrete roof tile covering. Right. These, however, steps that we're going to follow, and we're going to, in this lecture, we'll only look at part 1 in this lecture. We will discuss the first 3 steps. In total, there's 7. We will only, in this specific lecture, discuss the first 3 steps. Step number 1 is basically your very first step, almost in month 1 of the specific project, where you take your bills of quantities, the price bills of quantities, and you'll divide it up into the various work group totals. So that is step number 1. And for that, we've already did that subdivision for each work trade. We'll have then the value. For instance, work group 104 for earthworks, that was the value in the bill for earthworks. So you'll make a summary of all the various work groups: electrical installation, profit and attendance, which is now work group 0, non-adjustable items, and then also the preliminaries, which is now actually bill number 1, but it's work group 190. And in this specific project, there was also contingencies to the amount of 50,000 Rand. And add the VAT, and then we'll get to the actual contract sum or the tender figure. So that is the breakdown of the bill of quantities. We'll come back to this spreadsheet when we get to the latter part of the discussions. So step number 1 is already been done. We've divided the bill of quantities into the various work groups. So as I said, you'll do that at the beginning of the project. Step number 2 is basically then to start compiling the final account. So you're going to start off with the various contract instructions that is been issued by the principal agent. You compile your final account, even if it's a draft. You still need to negotiate with the contractor, but you allow something in the final account where you're going to issue payment certificates based on that estimated figures. Obviously, in this case, it will be our final account, not a draft, but we'll compile in a final account where the contractor and the employer will then sign the final account in agreement. So if we look at our final account, let's start with our step number 2, the final account based on the 6 contract instructions. So we're going to start with contract instruction number 1, and I'm going to run through this very quickly because we already discussed the compilation of a final account, the various contract instructions. Contract instruction number 1 states that we need to remeasure the foundations. In other words, foundations is measured provisionally in the bill, so we're going to omit what we've measured and we're going to add the new. So there was also a discussion point where we could have group omissions, in other words, a lump sum total for earthworks and a lump sum total for masonry, for concrete, etc. In this specific exercise, you'll note that all the items is omitted individually. So all the individual items for earthworks is omitted individually right up till the very last one, item number 14, which is the paint on external walls. So that was measured in the bill, and you'll note that all the items is referred to as, meaning it's referred to as the actual bill item 12 in this case on page 1. You'll note there's no items here under the omissions where there's no reference to a bill. It's all as, because it's in the bill, we need to omit them. So a total of 300,225 Rand is to be omitted, and we'll carry that over to the summary page of the final account. Then the additions. So we'll start off with the very first item, and we add the new quantity. So if you go to the omissions, you'll see the excavate for trenches. We've omitted 350. You go on site and you remeasure the total excavations, and you'll get a new quantity. So the only variable under the additions is the quantity. The rate still remains the same. It's only the quantity. So that can go up or down. You'll also note in this particular case, we had 14 specific items, and under the additions, we'll also have 14 items measured. It's not necessary that under the additions, you should have the same quantity. It can be even less than what you've measured, but it can even be more additional items that you're going to add under the additions in this particular case. Also note that all the additions, it's still referenced as items because it's current items measured in the bill. If we also look at the keep excavations free from water, in this case, the emissions was 500 and the additions was also 500. The argument here could be that, remember in the emissions we had 350 for excavations. In the new measured quantity, that's 375, so that's not going to make a major difference. So you could negotiate with the contract and we can agree on the same amount. If the additions is substantially less or more, we can argue and say, well, let's increase that or decrease that on a pro rata basis. So in this case, our additions adds up to 310 Rand, 310,000 rather, 676 Rand, and that will also then be carried over to the final account summary page. Contract instruction number 2, the adjustment of all work that is measured provisionally, in this case the electrical. If there was, let's say, air conditioning, ventilation, you'll do the same for those nominated subcontract work. So we omit what we've measured in the bill. In this case, there was a provisional amount. You've got the contractor did price the attendance and as well as the profit. So that's an omission of 106,000 Rand, and the additions. So obviously you'll get that figure from the electrical engineer, and remember this figure excludes VAT. The adjustment for attendance basically is the pro rata calculation. It's the original times it by the actual. In other words, 9,000 was based on 88,000, times it by the actual will give me my new figure for attendance. The same application for the profit. Then the contract instruction number 3 talks about the adjustment for prime cost amount for lock set. Now remember, prime cost is only for the material. So in this case, there was a prime cost items in the bill that was for the lock sets on item 4, page 8, to the amount of 250. Now, in that specific item 4 on page 8, the prime cost is in the description and it's referenced there as 150 Rand, but the contractor now adds the profit and the labor, and in the bill he inserts 250. So at that tender stage, we don't know how did you get to this 250. All that we give the contractor was the 150 in the description for the prime cost, and the contractor insert 250. Only now in the final account, I need to ask the contractor now, how did you get to that 250? So the contractor give me that breakdown. And based on the given breakdown, I am now in a position to calculate the new rate. Under additions, the new or the actual lock set that is now been selected cost 165 Rand. Now remember, that's the material price excluding VAT. So the material price, we changed the prime cost of 150 that was allowed for the material. The actual cost for the material is now 165 Rand. Let's install the lock set. Now in this case, you'll note that in the bill, 58 Rand was allowed to install the lock. There's no real difference here. Irrespective of the cost, if it's now a 3 or a 4 lever lock set, you will still spend the same amount of time, so therefore the labor will remain the same. The profit, however, is then a pro rata adjustment. Again, it's based on the allowable, that what was allowed originally, times it by the actual cost. Now, if we look at this for 45 Rand, where did you get it from? If you look at that calculation, it was originally 42 Rand, was based on 208 Rand. That's originally. Times it by the actual, the current, which is 223 Rand, 165 plus 58. So that gives me now a new profit figure there of 48. If you add up the three totals, that will give me now the new rate for the 4 lever lock set. Contract instruction number 4, omit the ceilings to 13 garages. That's a straightforward one. You'll take the total quantity that was measured for ceilings in the bill, divided by 35, because the bill relates to 35 garages. So it's a total quantity in the bill divided by 35 times it by 13 will give you 169. Remember the order of the items, all in trade order, and if you look at the 4 items, it's all as per item number on the various page. That gives me then a total omission of 19,214 Rand. Contract instruction number 5, remeasurement of plumbing. There's a statement there was no change to the measurement, so no cost implication. And as we said, although there's a 0 amount, let's include the contract instruction, because if I submit this final account, the client is going to ask, where is contract instruction number 5? You missed that one. Contract instruction number 6, the last one, asks us to paint the fiber cement roof covering. Now in the bill, the total roof covering was 910 square meters. There was no paint measured, so therefore in this case it's a new item. There is no reference to the actual description, so where there's no item measured in the bill, in the case of a new item, you'll have to make up a total detailed description, fully detailed, and then obviously the contractor needs to submit you a price, a rate per square meter. And this rate per square meter, the new rate, you need to, as part of the addendum to the final account, have evidence. How did you get to that? You know, it's a normal breakdown of material, labor, plant, overheads, and profit to get to this 64 Rand and 78 Rand. So that is now supplied by the contractor. There's another one, contract instruction number 7. Remember this one, whenever there's a contingency allowed in the bill of quantities, you need to omit the contingencies. You need to ask the principal agent to create a contract instruction, or if not, then you create your own as a quantity surveyor, but you have to omit. So in this case, yes, there was an amount of 50,000 Rand allowed for, so we'll omit the contingencies and we'll deduct it from the final account summary page. So that brings me to the end of the contract instructions. So very minimal. So we completed the final account. So if we go back to the step 3, which is now a summary of the final account, the final account summary page, and we'll only touch on a portion thereof, and in my later discussions, lecture, I will then continue. So the summary page here is basically to transfer the totals for the various contract instructions to a final account summary page. So in this case, we will start off with the net contract sum. Now this net contract sum is your tender figure, the contract sum, less the VAT. So that figure there is the contract sum or the tender figure, excluding the VAT. And then we go to the contract instruction number 1, which we've remeasured the foundations. We omit and we add. So we do the right up till the final contract instruction, in this case, contract instruction number 7, the omission of contingencies. We omit the 50,000 Rand. So we add up all the omissions, we add up the additions, and then a omissions total here of 484 Rand, 1,189 Rand, which will give me that figure there before the adjustment of P's and G's. Good. We will stop here with this part 1 of the discussion. So what we've discussed here is step 1, to divide your bill into the various work groups. Make sure that the work group totals add up to the actual price bill. In other words, it must add up to the actual tender figure, the contract sum. Step number 2 is then to start compiling your final account, all the various contract instructions, right up till the very last one. All of the contract instructions must be agreed upon. If there was new rates, it must be negotiate with the contractor. There must be clear evidence of all new items, the rates specifically. Once you've done your contract, your final account, all the contract instructions being priced, and we're happy with that, we will then draft a final account summary page, and we will transfer all the contract instructions totals to the summary page. Good. I will stop here at this point. We will then continue with the part 2 with more further discussions at a later stage. We'll see each other again.